Slight change to the programme. I've had something published this week, so I thought it would be an appropriate time to share it with you. So here it is, published this week in Ethnic and Racial Studies, a study of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, authored by myself and Dr. Daniel Stietsky. So no long preamble, of course, in such a limited time, but the debates around anti-Semitism and Islamophobia tend to be historical, political, and rhetorical in nature. Anti-Semitism in particular has been dominated by historical studies. If we think about the public debates around the two concepts, we often hear about them in politics, accusations of political parties being either anti-Semitic or Islamophobic. We hear a lot from community leaders, and we hear a lot from commentators and experts. We don't often hear from the people within the communities themselves, and this is what the study sought to address. Where research methods have been used in this field, they tend to be qualitative rather than quantitative, and where evidence is used, it tends to be anecdotal rather than large scale. Now at this stage, I should say, I'm not looking to replace these methods or these approaches, I'm looking to add to them and to diversify the field. So in order to diversify the field, we conducted a survey in two stages. It was undertaken by Daniel at the Institute of Jewish Policy Research, and as you can see, we surveyed just under 1,500 Jewish people and just under 1,000 Muslim people, and we treated the data, we weighted the data so that it's nationally representative. So we argue that these are the attitudes of Jewish people in this country and Muslim people in this country. Next question, what did we actually do? Well, we were interested to find out what Jewish people found offensive and what Muslim people find offensive. So rather than being told from politicians and community leaders, we thought we'd build it from the bottom up. So in order to do that, we showed our Jewish respondents 6 statements. So the statements are here, and they're the sort of common tropes of anti-Semitism. So the respondents were asked, would you consider a non-Jewish person to be anti-Semitic if she or he said the following? Israelis behave like Nazis towards Palestinians. If the person does not consider Jews living in the UK to be British, if Jews are not capable of integrating into British society, if the interests of Jews in the UK are very different from the rest of the population, if Jewish people have too much power, and if the Holocaust is a myth or has been exaggerated. To complement these anti-Semitic tropes, we also use some Islamophobic tropes, and I'll show you 6 here. So the respondents were asked, the Muslim respondents were asked, would you consider someone to be Islamophobic if they said, most Muslims sympathise with terrorists, British Muslims do not share Western values, British Muslims have no interest in integration, the interests of Muslims in Britain are very different from the rest of the population, Muslims have too much influence, and Muslims often overreact to criticism of their religion. So the classics of Islamophobia. Okay, so I'm going to whip through 3 areas of findings. There are lots more in the paper, and I'm happy to share it with you later if you wish. So the first question we thought was, how comfortable are people from each group, how comfortable are they in providing an affirmative answer? Not whether they're offended or not, but do they know whether they're offended or not? So we can see in the Jewish respondents, the blue are all the affirmative answers, and the don't knows, the people who couldn't decide, are fairly small, between 1% and 3%. So the next question is, are Muslim respondents as able to give an answer? And that answer is not as much. So the don't knows are a much bigger category. Around 20% of the people we asked didn't know whether the statements were or were not Islamophobic. Now you might be sitting there thinking, well, I don't think these are particularly Islamophobic statements, or you might think we've chosen the wrong ones. I would say 1 in 5 of the data set would disagree with you and wouldn't actually be able to come up with a decision like that. Yeah. Next, we looked at whether the respondents were actually offended by the statements. Between 3/4 and 96% were. We then asked about the Muslim respondents. Were they offended by the statements? We can see that it's 50-50 almost for every statement, and in fact, none of the statements had a majority view. So very, very quickly, I realise time is short, we looked at the role of age. So Jewish respondents over 40 are more sensitive than those under 40, so age plays a part. For the Muslim respondents, age plays no part. We looked at the role of education. Jewish respondents with degrees were less sensitive to the Nazi comments. Muslim respondents with degrees were more sensitive overall, so education seems to push sensitivity in opposite directions. So just to sum up, less certainty and consensus among Muslim respondents, older Jewish respondents are more sensitive, and educated Muslim respondents are more sensitive. Kind of makes sense. Next big question, so what? The dreaded social science question, so what? So here's 3 so whats. We know that hatred of Jews and Muslims goes back centuries, but in terms of it being an objective analysis, anti-Semitism is way older than Islamophobia. Does that play a part? We know that older Jewish people tend to be more sensitive. Is it the case there isn't as much agreement between the Jewish respondents because it's less settled, it's still contested, still debated? Older Jewish people, we know, are more sensitive. Age plays no part for the Muslim group. Could it be the role of the Holocaust, of course, in living memory or the memory of parents? Could it be that pivotal events such as the wars of the 40s and 60s, Arab-Israel conflicts, have shaped sensitivity in this country? Could it be that for British Muslims, the present matters more than the past? And finally, the role of education. Is it the case that Islamophobia operates as a objective analysis at a very elite level? Is it something which is yet to filter down into sort of common understandings among less educated subgroups? I might offer you an example of this. If we think about the new APPG on British Muslims definition of Islamophobia, it's fairly technical. It says Islamophobia is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. What does an expression of Muslimness mean to someone outside academia? I would say not much. Thank you for listening.